Link. Everyone to today's webinar in our Understanding Your Historic Building series. Our topic is photographing your house, tips from an architectural photographer. I'm really pleased to let everyone know that Dave Cloth from Dave Cloth Photography is here to guide us through some best practices and some ideas to help you take better pictures of your building. So a couple of housekeeping items that you've probably heard before if you've been with us. Feel free to have the video camera on or off during the presentation. You might want to just keep it off. If your connection is unstable, turning it off can actually improve the reception that you're getting of the video broadcast into your house. Please do stay on mute when you're not speaking. And this says you can ask questions during the presentation using the chat feature, which is absolutely true. The chat button is on the bottom bar along your Zoom interface. We're going to take Q&A as a group at the end of the presentation. So you can ask your questions at any point, but for voice questions, we'll have you wait until the presentation ends, and then you can ask your questions. So I want to give a quick thank you to all of our sponsors, which you can see on the screen here. They're quite numerous. Our year-long industry leaders, the Cumberland Crossing, Ocean View at Falmouth, Freeport Antiques and Heirlooms, Linda Bean's Main Kitchen, Norway Savings Bank, and Northland. And there you can see the rest of our sponsors here, and we will show those terrific supporters of Maine preservation and our programming at the end of this session as well. So our speaker today, as I mentioned, is Dave Cloth of Dave Cloth Photography. Dave's an architectural photographer based in Rockland, Maine. He was the photographer for two Tilbury house books, Homes Down East by Earl Shuttleworth Jr., Chris Glass, and Scott Hansen, and Restoring Your Historic House by Scott Hansen, which is an in-depth look at rehabilitating historic homes that just came out in the past, I want to say a little over a year, and it's a great book. If you don't have a copy, you should definitely put one in your library, and it is available for sale on the Maine Preservation website as well as bookstores near you. He was the photographer of an exhibit at the Gamble House in Pasadena, California by noted Japanese architect Yoshihiro Takeshita, and the resulting book Shiguchi, which was published in June 2019. In 2016, he exhibited his work and presented at an international symposium in Venice, Italy. Subsequently, the exhibit traveled to Tokyo, Suzhou, China, Milan, and Stockholm. Most recently, his work was selected for inclusion in the 21st edition of Sir Bannister Fletcher's Global History of Architecture. And as I mentioned, Dave is here today. You can see him on your screen. And we'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So if you'll hold for just a moment, I'm going to switch over to the presentation.
Good afternoon and welcome to Exterior Architectural Photography Tips. My name is Dave Clough and I'm an architectural photographer based in Rockland, Maine. In this webinar, I'm going to go over establishing needs, key general points, key points, workflow, gear, conclusion, and resources. First up is establishing need. There are many purposes for wanting quality architectural photographs. What is yours? Perhaps before and after documentation. Here, a house under construction and the finished home. A before shot of a renovation project and the completed project. Perhaps the most drastic example I can show you of before and after is of a house in York, Pennsylvania. This image is courtesy of the homeowner, Jim Lehman. He He and his wife undertook this restoration project, and the result is simply stunning. Perhaps you need photographs for National Register of Historic Places application. As noted on the National Park Service website, photographs submitted to the National Register of Historic Places and the National Historic Landmark Survey as official documentation should be clear, well composed, and provide an accurate visual representation of the property and its significant features. They must illustrate the qualities discussed in the description and statement of significance. Photographs should show historically significant features and also any alterations that have affected the property's historic integrity. You'll see a red magnifying glass icon in some of the slides, and this indicates that more information is available in the resource PDF sheet that is available. Perhaps your needs are for real estate. Springtime provides a lovely season to photograph for real estate. Fresh green foliage, flowers are in bloom, and please remember that if you are photographing for real estate, you should not show the realtor's sign. In my real estate photography, I like to show an overview of the surrounding area, and for this particular property, I wanted to show the proximity to the water. It's also nice to show some unique features of the property. Perhaps your needs are simply for memories. Here, a shot from Florence, Italy, and you'll note that there are some pedestrians and cyclists, and they give a sense of scale to the building. Twilight shot from Milan, Italy. A quiet moment in Suzhou, China. I also like capturing unique and interesting buildings. I don't believe there's anything like this. This is Spaceport America in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Also in New Mexico, the Taos Pueblo. So determine your needs. Your needs may be before and after documentation, National Historic Registry of Historic Places, real estate, memories, or perhaps something else. Your needs will determine the quality you require of your images and will help you in creating your vision. My needs as a professional photographer demand the absolute best equipment I can afford. Your needs may vary. Key general points. I consider architectural photography to be documentary work. Your needs may vary, but I am not looking for abstract creative art in my work. I am looking to get an accurate representation of the building being photographed. Here, a home on the coast that I photographed for the architect. Though not a hard and fast rule, it comes down to your vision. I find it is generally a good practice to photograph on sunny days with pleasing blue skies. Shadows add a sense of depth over flat light. Here's a project in Rumford, Maine that I photographed for Maine preservation. Overcast skies, and the light was rather flat. Fortunately, in a little while the sun came out and there were blue skies, and the subtle shadows offer a sense of depth. Common sense is a big part of architectural photography, or any photography in my opinion. Be sure to remove unsightly items such as trash cans, hoses, ladders, and you'll want to arrange furniture. Here's a real estate image that I did not take, but lots of clutter and the trash can is rather prominent. I had the opportunity to photograph this same building for a real estate agent, and the image is cleaned up by simply removing the unsightly items. While not an exterior photo, this shows where common sense might come into play. This is from an ad I just saw this week on Facebook for a prominent window company. And again, those trash cans really catch the eye. Few minutes in Photoshop to give you an idea of what it would look like without the trash cans. And you'll also note that the vertical lines are straightened. This is a key point that I will talk about in a few minutes. Get a mental image in your mind, your vision. Use the lens available to fulfill this vision as closely as possible. Determine what to document and what not to. Sometimes it is helpful to show surroundings. Sometimes it is not. Your vision will determine what to shoot. Most often you will have decisions to make. What you choose to show and what not to show will determine what your image conveys. Here, a castle moat in Japan, but by moving a few feet and including more of the surroundings, we do see that it is an urban environment. Be sure to walk around a property, as one view may be a little deceptive. Another example of choosing the right lens and fulfilling your vision. Three views, all with a different perspective of the property. Key points. First up, I'd like to talk about tripods. For all of my architectural photography, I am always using a tripod. A tripod provides stability to ensure sharp images. They allow the camera to be absolutely level. They allow for opportunity to bracket exposures. And using a tripod will slow down the process in a good way, and is a beneficial way to allow for consideration for a thoughtful image. Using a tripod allows for longer exposures. I find that any exposure slower than 1/50th is at risk to blur. Using a tripod is absolutely necessary for twilight images. 3 examples of twilight images. none of these would have been possible without using a tripod. The golden rule of architectural photography: keep vertical lines vertical, keep horizontal lines horizontal. Here is an image brought into Photoshop with guidelines drawn, and you will note the vertical lines are vertical, the horizontal lines are horizontal. To include a building in its entirety, there is a tendency to tilt the camera up to capture the top of a roof, resulting in parallax distortion, known as the keystone effect, where the top of a building appears to be leaning back. There are several solutions. You can move away from a building, change to a wider lens when possible, elevate the camera. You could use a perspective control lens, also known as a tilt shift lens. In all of the above, it is best to be on a tripod and level. Use a bubble level or a camera's built-in level, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. These two pictures show how to hold the camera. And in this case, the camera is my phone. On the left, you see that I am tilting the camera back in order to capture the top of a building. This is what you do not want to do. The image on the right shows the proper way to hold the camera. Level. The resulting images on the left, because I tilted the camera back, the building appears to be leaning back and the vertical lines are distorted. On the right, the vertical lines are vertical. And I think in this photo, actually, I could have elevated the camera somewhat to reduce the distortion at the top. If for some reason you were not able to be level when you took the image, you can always bring it into Photoshop, and there are several ways to straighten a photo. More information on how to do so is available in the resource PDF. Vertical lines vertical, horizontal lines horizontal. This image is an example of elevating the camera. If I had been on ground level, the views of the coastline would not have been visible. By elevating the camera, we can see nice views of the water. Vertical lines vertical. If you take away nothing else from this webinar, please remember to keep your camera level. It's important not to clip a building's features. Here's a shoot from a main preservation project, and from left to right you see the building in its entirety. And for this image, I wanted to include the unique landscaping. Sometimes a vertical image with a portrait mode orientation is advantageous. Avoid shooting head-on shots of the facade. Corner shots provide more information on the mass of a building. We saw this image earlier, a shot of the facade of the Webster Grammar School, but I think this corner shot gives more information on the building. Another example of a house in need of some care, a facade shot, but it's the corner shot that gives you more information. One more example at twilight. Generally speaking, a good time to shoot exteriors is when the sun is at your back. Choose your season and time of day to match your vision. This is a pretty good example of a not ideal time to shoot. I'm looking almost directly into the sun. I did have the opportunity to return at a different season. The sun behind my back. Your vision will determine the time of day that you would want to shoot. Your vision will also determine the season you would like to shoot. Without the sun, the image is rather flat. With the sun, there's a little more depth to the image and a bit more dramatic. Another example of time of day here, an afternoon shot and a twilight shot. A reminder that it may take more than one image to properly fulfill your vision and what you want to visually say about a house. Here's a pretty unique home, but I think it's this wider shot of the property that gives you more information. Another example in this set of 3 images, depending on your vision. What do you want to say in the photograph? Kind of a close-up view of the house. And a shot with more information. Don't forget detail shots, ornamental features, special trim, unique paint, steps and walkways, landscaping, materiality. These are all good things to keep in mind when photographing. Here, a nice eyebrow dormer. This weather vane caught my eye. Mechanics Hall in Portland, Maine, designed by Thomas Sparrow. Lovely detail features that I wanted to capture. A detail of the dormers. And next, 3 images from Japan to show materiality. a nice, interesting thatch dormer. If time allows, get a variety of images and then decide which best matches your vision. This next series is of the former TWA terminal, now a hotel. I was able to shoot at various times of the day, and each conveys a different feeling. Or it might be an entirely different view of a building. So a little bit about my workflow. I always try to do a site visit to familiarize myself with the building and surroundings, and this will help determine the best time of day to shoot, and I start to formulate a vision. We have the day of photography, and as soon as I return, upload to the computer and immediately back up to an external drive. I'll process the raw images and again immediately back up the processed images. A great way to deliver the images is through WeTransfer.com. So a little bit about gear. With advancements in camera technology, there are many options. I will be discussing gear that meets my needs, not to say what you need, but to have a starting point in the conversation. I realize many don't want or need to invest in gear. Phone cameras and software algorithms are getting better and better. Most of the principles I have discussed can be applied to any camera system. And there's an old saying which I believe to be true, that the best camera is the one you have on hand when you need it. My latest camera is the Canon R5. I depend on these two lenses for architectural shoots. One is the Tilt Shift 24mm and also the 17mm Tilt Shift lens. You'll find more information on Tilt Shift lenses in the resource PDF. I use a Gitzo carbon fiber tripod for stability, and the beauty of this tripod is that it can extend up to 16 feet. As important as tripods, the head that goes on top of a tripod to hold your camera. There are several kinds of heads available. You'll find most common is the ball head. Also there's the pistol grip head. But for architectural photography, you're really going to want to have a geared head. This allows for precise and exact leveling of the camera. To be sure you're level, and I've tried to stress how important this is, there's a simple solution in a bubble level. It fits in the hot shoe of your camera. In using a geared head, it is quite easy to make sure you are level. Some of the new cameras have in-camera leveling system. You may also find grid lines on your screen, and this is helpful too. In my camera bag is a Zacuto. It's a, well, I call it the world's most expensive magnifying glass, but It allows, you put it on the viewfinder and it allows for detailed focusing. This is a gray card, and more information on gray cards is available in the PDF. Very important in correcting the white balance of your image. A very handy tool to have is the Cam Ranger. I have the Cam Ranger 2, and what this does is connects your camera to your iPad, and you can control remotely all the functions on your camera. Indispensable on shoots. The Gitzo tripod I had mentioned is bulky and heavy and not suitable for traveling. For traveling, I love this Peak Design tripod. It folds up very compactly and extends to about 5 feet. Also indispensable is an app for my phone called the Light Track app. In this image, it's an overlay over a satellite image, and you plug in the address and the date that you want to shoot, and the yellow line gives you sunrise. The blue line is the sunset, and the red line is at any point in between, and you can plug in what time you'd like to shoot. This is a really great app to have. I do realize that not everyone will want to invest in camera gear. Phones these days are quite wonderful for cameras, and whether you use a camera with a tripod or your phone, I do recommend putting your phone on a tripod. And there are several manufacturers of devices which you can attach your phone to your tripod. So thank you very much for tuning in to this webinar. I have gone over establishing need. Determining need helps in creating your vision. Architectural photography is documentary work to get an accurate representation of a building. Don't forget about common sense. Please remove that trash can. Create a vision and decide what to include and what not to include. When possible, always shoot on a tripod, and be sure to keep the camera level with vertical lines vertical and horizontal lines horizontal. Try not to clip a building's features. Include corner shots to show the mass of a building. Shoot with the sun at your back or side, depending on ground conditions and your vision. And also be sure to shoot a variety of images. Detail shots and vignettes are important. Gear, there's tons of photography gear. I'm often asked, what's the best camera to get? And I think it's a great idea to try different cameras and see what feels best in your hands, and get a sense of how easy the controls of the camera are. It is my hope that the tips offered here will help you see your vision and capture it with whatever camera system you have. So there should be a PDF to download on resources, and in this PDF you'll find information and links to the National Register Photo Policy, a great site for photographing real estate, information about parallax distortion, further information on tilt-shift lenses. There are many ways to straighten an image in Photoshop. There's a link to one such way. RAW versus JPEG format. I'm a big fan of shooting RAW. You can decide for yourselves. White balance information and using a gray card. Maine Media Workshops is a fantastic photography school based in Rockport, Maine. If you're interested in gear and cameras, DP Review is a fantastic site. Hunt's Photo in Portland, Maine. Wonderful resource to have in the state. The Light Track app, there's a link to find out more about that, as well as with the Cam Ranger. I've included a couple links to giants in architectural photography. And there's a nice summary of architecture blogs to follow, and I think you'll find the more images you look at, the better you have a sense of developing your own vision. I have set up a gallery of the images I have used, and there are some extra images included in this gallery as well. I had the opportunity to work with Scott Hansen in his book, Restoring Your Historic House. There's a link to his site. Finally, a link to my website as well as my Instagram account. Please feel free to follow. Again, many thanks. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time.
All right. So thanks, Dave, for that review. I hope everyone found it informative. Dave mentioned a PDF of resources. We're going to circulate that after this call. It'll come with a recording of this session, so that'll be distributed after this meeting. Dave also mentioned, I'll just note there at the end, and thinking about Photoshop as a tool for straightening images, which is fantastic. I love Photoshop, but not everybody has the need for Photoshop. On your iPhone or iPad, your camera tools do include some basic straightening capabilities, and there are a lot of online resources, and a number of them are free, where you can do some online photo editing and effect adding, and we can make those available too if people are curious about that. So I am interested, and if I can pull this up, looks like we have some questions. Sorry, I'm having some computer issues. So Maggie has a question, Dave.
Yes.
She'd like to know your thoughts on photos for marketing, newsletter, website pages. I mean, I will say that obviously the images should still be of high quality. They do not need to be print resolution, usually 72 PPI or DPI. These are technical, not that technical terms, but pixels per inch is usually sufficient. But I'll turn it over to you, Dave, because you know a lot more about this than I do.
Well, I'm not sure I do, but so once the question once more.
Interested in your thoughts on photographs for marketing, newsletter, website pages, and so on.
Well, whether it's architectural or otherwise, a compelling photograph. Technically, if it's something online, you're not going to want a full resolution image. I don't believe it takes a while to load. I'm not sure what else to say about that, other than what you mentioned as well, the technical aspects.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the principles of quality photos are going to be the same regardless of the media in which the image is expressed. But image file size, as Dave mentioned, is probably the biggest thing. What a really high res image that you're going to use in a print publication is going to be very slow to load online. And that's, you know, when you hit websites that are really image heavy and the load time is slow, that's what's going on. It's just that the images are really high quality, which is great because you can zoom in and see a lot of information in them, but it does slow systems down. There are a lot of different kinds of image files.
Right.
that have different quality aspects to them. So there's things like you probably heard of JPEGs and GIFs or GIFs, depending on which camp you fall into, and PNG files. They all have different attributes that they bring to the party. JPEGs are a fairly small file size and carry a lot of image resolution quality, which is great. But every time you resize them or save them, they start to degrade. So using the original image is going to be key there.
Yeah, the
GIFs,
original TIFF image.
yeah, working from a TIFF is going to be ideal. GIFs or GIFs have limited colors, so only 256 colors, but look good as far as that goes, and are of good, file size. And then PNGs, which probably everyone is starting to see more and more of, have the opportunity to have a wide, full robust color portfolio, and don't degrade, so they look good no matter which size they're at. They do have a larger file size than a JPEG though, but PNG files are really popular for web. They're not for print, but they do really well in online environments. So more questions coming in. Your thoughts, Dave, on Lightroom and on Canon versus Nikon, if you want to get political.
Well, regarding Lightroom, I've always been on a Mac computer, and years ago they started a program called Aperture, and it was actually developed before Lightroom, and I got hooked on it, and for years resisted switching over to Lightroom, but I was forced to do so when Apple stopped supporting Aperture, and I made the switch a couple of years ago, and actually I'm glad I did. It's constantly developed, and Aperture was never developed, and I think it just does a fantastic job. I think very highly of Lightroom. And Canon or Nikon, really, as I mentioned in the webinar, I've had several Canons. I've never shot on a Nikon, but I have used just as an example, a Fuji mirrorless camera, and I found I think it's important just to hold a camera in your hands, and before you buy anything, make sure you understand the menu system. Navigating around these cameras, they offer so much, and it's a combination of buttons to push and dials to twist. And I like the camera Canon system. I understand the functions, and it feels good in my hands. And whether it's Nikon or Canon, I'm of the belief that you're going to get beautiful images out of both systems.
Great. Our next question is from Maggie, and I think it's a clarification of her earlier question.
Sure.
Thinking about including people in photographs. I mean, for an architectural photograph where you're probably just looking at features and attributes, maybe not, but people can bring a lot of scale and humanity to photos. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I tend not, in most of my commercial work, I tend not to include people. If I'm photographing in a museum or an art installation, I do include people for scale, and you got a sense of that in that image of the church in Florence. It was massive, and had the people not been in that photo, you wouldn't have had an understanding of its size. I did just read an article, a discussion about apparently there's some issues with including people these days in images because of representation, and the issue was, well, why are only white people in the images? And so there is some discussion on inclusiveness. But generally speaking, for my architecture work, I don't include people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And another issue to think about when you're including people is privacy concerns and permission. So if you're going to include people in
Exactly.
your shots, you have to get permission. And that's as easy as doing, a waiver release, but you have to ask people for it. And some people aren't comfortable with doing that. I know I'm not.
There is, you see it all the time. There is, you can slow the exposure down, and you'll see the form of a person, and they'll be kind of blurry, and that's
Yeah.
a common practice.
Yeah. And another practice is if you're photographing in a public space or a space that you are controlling, you can put out, a statement that you, by coming into this place or being in this environment, that you are, tacitly giving permission, that you have to opt out. Those are some ways you can control
Right.
that. So we got some more questions coming in, which is great. From Matt Collins, do you have a favorite point and shoot digital camera for when you want more control than the phone, but you don't want to carry your SLR around, say while you're on a boat?
Well,
Which is a good one.
that was my intent in getting the Fuji system about a year and a half ago. I wanted a camera smaller than my Canon, and geez, it became so cumbersome to figure out the dials. But I did just recently get the iPhone Pro Max, and I'm really amazed at what it can do. And I mean, it's got a tiny sensor, and the lenses, I mean, there are 3 lenses on it. They're tiny. How does it take such amazing images? And it's all in the algorithms, in the processing of the information. But they've come a long ways. And so now I don't see a need to get a point and shoot. I consider my phone the point and shoot.
Yeah, just get a good waterproof case.
I did just get a Canon R5. It's now my workhorse camera, and it is it's slightly smaller than the DSLR. It's a mirrorless system.
So Dave, since you mentioned you just got that iPhone, have you tried the LiDAR functionality on it? I almost lost my mind when I found out that it had that.
Yeah, well, I also, thanks for asking. I also offer Matterport services. It's a system to offer virtual tours of interior spaces, and using LiDAR technology. And the phone does have that. I actually haven't checked it out too much because I haven't figured out or found a way to get a rotating head.
Mm.
But yeah, it's amazing that it's coming out in an iPhone. Yeah.
I know, I was like, I don't need another phone. And then I heard that and I was like, well, maybe someday. So Hillary asked, how
Yeah.
often do you find the need to retouch your images? And what are the most common things that you find need adjustment?
Okay, well, that's a very good question, Hillary. I shoot all my images in RAW format, and most point and shoots will shoot JPEG format, and the camera is actually doing processing. With RAW, the camera is not doing processing, and everything is done in post-processing. So every photo I take, I process. There's tonal adjustments, brightness, contrast. Now and then I'll bring it into Photoshop to remove something unwanted. But mostly I stay right in Lightroom for that. I don't know if that
Sorry,
answers
I had to
the question
unmute.
completely,
Sorry
or
about
is there a follow-up?
Okay, next question. We got a bunch of questions. So John asks, do you do interior photography? the answer to that is yes. And if so, will you present a separate session? If not, Ally, arrange another speaker on interiors? So that's an interesting question, John. Dave and I actually talked about that. Dave, you want to talk a little bit about the challenges there?
Yeah, well,
hard.
I do interior photography and I love doing interior photography. It's a time-consuming process, and it's. But I was telling Ali yesterday, I don't know how I would do it in a webinar such as this. I mean, there is a way to do it. I'm just not sure the format that would be best. I mean, if interior photography is, the challenge is lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not using any lights, your camera is going to either adjust for the exterior view out the window, which is typically very bright. And when it does that, the interior is very dark. Or if you expose for the interior, then your windows are going to be blown out, which in some cases isn't terrible, but in other cases it's quite an eyesore. So that with interior photography, you compensate for that. You expose for the exterior out the window, and then you light the inside. And there's a lot that goes into it as far as lights to use and placement of the lights. And yeah, I mean, I'd like to consider doing it, but I'm not sure what the format of that would be.
It
There's so
felt
much to go over.
Yeah, it felt like talking about it that it would be more like a post-COVID workshop, like a hands-on.
Yeah.
Where you could experience it and actually see what you're talking about.
But I, to the point, I'm happy to pursue looking into it.
Well, thank you. The next question is, do you use an external flash? I'm having trouble, this person says, with shadow cast from my wide angle lens when I use the internal flash.
Yeah, if you're going to get into flash, if you can, I mean, it's not always an option for everyone, but I never photograph with a flash on the camera. You're going to want to use an external flash or flashes. It's on camera, it creates very hard shadows. Mm-hmm. And you're going to want to diffuse the flash itself. So, you can bounce it off. If you're inside, you can bounce it off a ceiling and go from there. And that will help quite a bit.
Okay. So this one is related to interior photography, and it's from Scott. So give it the answer that you can. So thinking about what are the basics and maybe the minimum of equipment that you would need for lighting an interior. I mean, you need the lamp, you're going to need probably a shade. I mean, want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, you're going to need a tripod, as I've mentioned. It's really, I mean, let's talk about a typical, say, bedroom. You can probably get away with one flash and have it on a stand and point it into a corner and see what happens. I think you could probably do a lot with a two flash system. And so if your flash is off camera, you're going to have to find a way to fire that flash as well. And there are wireless systems available.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So that's the last question that we had in the chat. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to just unmute and ask at this point? We're interested in taking a question or two more before we break. And we'll close out with some information for you.
I'll ask another question.
Yeah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Dave.
Hi there.
Hi. I was wondering if you still shoot with film at all, and if you ever do large format photography.
Honestly, I wish I did large format photography. I don't. And no, I don't use film. I have a nice Canon film camera, but I don't. However, just this week, I started looking into converting some of my digital files into slides. I love slides. And
I'm thinking with a
I just
Pawtucket
got
John.
this antique slide viewer. It came in the mail today. So
Nice. I have one that's like from the 70s. I love peeking through it.
this looks like it's maybe from the 30s. I don't know, but I love it, and I love slides. And there are I checked it out online, and there are services to convert digital files into a slide transparency.
Awesome.
Seems a little pricey to me, but it's $5 a slide. So-
Oi. Sorry.
I had no idea slides are back. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
well, in my mind.
Those
So
hipsters.
it's odd.
They
I
bring
love
everything
slides,
back.
but I don't do film photography.
So Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about what you shared with me from Nico down in the Photoshop before we break?
Yes, thank you for the reminder. So I mentioned Hunt's Photo in Portland in the resource page. And I've kind of made the decision to buy all of my gear from them, and rather than go online. And they're a great resource. They're located near the main mall in one of the little smaller malls. They offer, hands-on camera experience, expertise as far as gear. And what they've offered for participants of this live webinar is a promotion, and I hope you take advantage of it. It's they're offering to give away memory cards to all the participants, and it's a 32 gigabyte memory card by SanDisk. And I think Ali will provide you with documentation of a registration. You bring the registration in and talk to Nico. I believe he's the store manager, and they'll set you up with a free memory card.
Yeah, that was very generous. Just your email confirmation, if you print that and take that in. A memory card to help you take as many pictures as you can without blowing out your memory, which is what I do. I have thousands and thousands of pictures. It's tragic. I never call anymore. You don't need to call. Plus, you got
Ali, before we leave, I really want to stress it's really the most important rule of architecture photography is to make sure you are level, and horizontal's horizontal, vertical's vertical. So,
but don't straighten the Tower of Pisa, maybe.
no, please.
The camera's level, not necessarily the building. And I think we've all know some buildings even here in state that maybe
Oh yeah, well,
have
that's
a bit of a lean. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we have some program notes and other questions. Okay.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Appreciate it, and look forward to meeting those of you that I haven't already met.
Yeah, Dave, thank you so much. I think this was a big session. I learned a lot from it. The light app, meter app. I mean, the sun location part of me.
The light
App alone, I
track
think,
app.
is worth the price of admission.
Those-
Light track. That's
I just looked it up before we went live. It's $8.99. I mean, it's just awesome.
It's gonna have 1,000 household uses actually. So you can think of other things you might want to do with that.
And that Cam Ranger device, it's phenomenal.
Mhm.
If you're into cameras, and you can control f-stop, all the controls on the camera you can do on your iPad and get a nice preview.
It's really cool.
So
Excellent. Thanks.
one more thing.
Um,
If you think of other questions that you'd like to
Yeah.
ask, feel free to contact me. My email address was on I guess it's available somewhere.
I think it's on the, if it's not on the resource sheet, we'll append it to
Yeah.
the email we sent out to the
I
participants.
would
Thank
love
you.
to help in any way I can.
Thanks, Dave. So awesome. All right, yeah, so if you have questions that you think of after the session, when you get the email from us, you can pop Dave the question and he'll get back to you. So just a quick programming note, upcoming events. In April, we're gonna have our next rehab lab, so tips for spring maintenance on your building. Get yourself ready and spruce up. And then also in April, at the end of the month, which is a new session that we've just added, which is pretty exciting. We're going to do a historic tax credits 201. This is going to be a discussion of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and the tax credit certification process. This session will be of interest to building owners, towns, commercial building owners, I should say, towns, developers, anyone looking to understand how the tax credit certification process works. We're going to discuss all three parts with our presenters, which are Christine Beard at Essex Preservation Consulting, Chris Kloss at Chris Kloss and Company, and Scott Hansen at McRosty Historic Advisors. You can learn more about these programs on our website and sign up for them there. And Gina, are you still with us? So you want to maybe talk a little bit about?
I'm still here. So first,
right.
Thank you, Dave. That was excellent. That was a really, really great program. And I'm Gina. I'm the development director with Maine Preservation. I just want to again thank our sponsors who are key supporters of our programming, and they've made our program expansion this year, which was essential during COVID possible. So we really appreciate their support. And I also want to add that Dave is also a sponsor for our, typically he comes to our gala and the annual honor awards and takes photos, which is a really great addition to the event. So anyway, thank you to all of our sponsors. Have a good evening.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Gina.
Yeah.
And thank you all for attending. And if you like what you saw and you want to support more programming like this, feel free to visit our website and make a donation. Otherwise, we'll see you on the newsletter and on our website and at our next webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Thanks again, Dave. That was awesome.
Take care.
Bye-bye.